Hello, my name is Ted Allen, and I'm here to present about optimal experimentation on games, focusing on a great game called ThreatGEN, which trains you in cybersecurity for industrial control systems. My co-authors include Mr. Matt Booth, Dr. Abdullah Alamayer, and Dr. Olivia Hernandez. Industrial control systems and cybersecurity is clearly an important topic. The U.S. Systems are known to be vulnerable and actually have already been penetrated, although foreign actors have only so far destroyed industrial control systems on a large scale in the Ukraine. Yet, if we study the famous Gerasimov doctrine from one of the key military leaders in Russia, they literally do intend to press their interests and their will throughout America and Ukraine, partly because of some fairly legitimate seeming concerns that they have about things that the United States has already done. This has motivated the game ThreatGEN. In which you can either play it from the red team or the blue team, and you can infiltrate and destroy industrial control systems. So where do we come in? Well, we invented a method that can help you to tell such things as, is the game balanced? And if you were to practice or get ready in the beginning of the game in a player's meeting, what are some good strategies for those players' meetings? And to do this, we invented a method where you do a small number of experiments. In fact, this is the example that we're using, where you control parts of the player A and player B strategies, and then you have the different teams play the game following the strategies they're assigned by each run, and then you wind up playing the game 8 times, and then you record the scores from both sides. And then you're ready to develop a deep game theoretic understanding. So the methods that we build upon include the great foundational work by Nash in 1951, where he invented the concept of Nash equilibria, and Harsanyi, where he did it, an important extension of Nash's work to address uncertainties. Yet both relate, or at least the Nash one primarily only relates to single period games like the one that we're going to focus on. And Mangasarian showed how you can relate Nash equilibria to KKT conditions. And then these more recent authors have generated code that's widely used for enumerating the Nash equilibria. And the last point, a lot more recent, even more recent articles have begun the process of enumerating other equilibria besides Nash equilibria, such as correlated equilibria and cumulative prospect theory equilibria, which often are more helpful for predicting what opponents will do. Although I think we're going to see in this example that the Nash equilibria probably is the cumulative prospect theory equilibrium. So the work that we're building upon more readily is our own research in decision analysis published last year. And the key contribution that we made in that article was that reward matrices are no longer needed as inputs. And all you need now is an experimental system. And, the current work has motivated this work that we're talking about today is what if the experimental costs are really high? And it really is hard to get, to play the game multiple times. Each one might take more than an hour, and so it can take, if you were trying to do like in the paper we did, all our examples would be like 30 or 40 runs. That'd be 30 or 40 instances of playing the game. So in the notation that we explored, we have M options for player A, N options for player B. There may be many options. In our example, we'll have 8 options for player A and 16 options for player B. And then there's the reward matrices that we're going to estimate. And then with the hats on them are the estimated, because we don't really have the real ones, although we can model the real ones. and then means and standard deviations of these constants, or of these variables, and the number of terms in our regression model. In our earlier paper, we showed how regression is a key tool in design of experiments for going from experimental systems to predicted rewards, then to equilibria. And so we added that first step, and we're going to show how that works. And that brings up all the experimental design notation. So just to review, the problem and experimental procedure from our earlier paper was just based on the 1951 formulation, which is shown right here, where you have two players deciding, and in the sort of general formulation for a single period, also called the bimatrix game, you have reward matrices A and B, which originally in 1951 were assumed known, but we're going to study them when they're not known. And what Nash basically pointed out, or one of his key contributions, was the important realization that not all optimizations are a single decision maker. It's often there's more than one decision maker, and the choices made by decision makers interact, and this shows how they can interact through reward functions for player A and reward functions for player B. So the ongoing research, what we're talking about today, is using smaller experimental designs and stronger assumptions, because, as I mentioned a minute ago, the number of runs could be prohibitively large to do the experiments. So in the old paper, we created a procedure, experimental procedure, which had covered initial experimentation, equilibrium estimation, where we identified factors, and then that generated m times n combinations of actions between the two players. And then we solved the average prediction variance problem to generate the experimental design. Then we collected the data, similar to what I showed earlier, except we did much bigger ones. And then we estimated the experimental model and parameters. We included interactions in the old one. This one, we're going to either not have any interactions or make a simplified assumptions. Then we estimated the empirical model parameters. Then we got the payoff matrices. Then we derived the equilibrium. So in the previous research, these equations can, in this theorem here, can greatly shorten the time to determine sufficiency conditions. So do we have enough experiments to be confident that our equilibrium estimate is accurate? So when we're done with this, when we say, okay, these are the equilibria for the game, and they could be Nash or cumulative prospect or correlated, are we confident that those equilibria are the real equilibria? Because we may simply not have done enough experimentation. So the scores after 20 turns are what we did in our example. And so we designed an experiment. These are the 8 runs. And this is the new type of very small DOE that we're studying now. And then on the right, so the red team follows, like, let's say run 1 means that in their players meeting, they decided to focus on exploits. They had to focus on, they're only recruiting after a certain number of points, and they don't do a lot of research. Whereas team B, or the defenders, focus on patching and remediation, and they also wait until after firm 4 to request more staff, and they do SEIM in the first 15 turns. So, and then they segment they start segmenting a little bit later. So in other words, that's their strategy. They wait, these ones over there. So then we input that, we make the people follow the script. There's some other choices they can also make following their own judgment. And then if they do it this way, team A gets more points than team B. And so those are the actual points that they get. So then we take, now we have those actual experimental runs. Now we're going to enumerate the decision options that each player has, which are really just a combinations of these factored levels. And so these are the 8 decision options that the red team has, and these are the 8 options that the blue team has, or the 16 options that the blue team has. And so they're just combinations of these different things. Like the first option would be all plus ones, which would be social engineering, wait until 120 and between 4 and 6. And similarly for player B, the first run is also all positive options. So that would be policies against social engineering only after the incident and after 15 and between 9 and 15 for these factors. So those are the options. That's sort of the game theoretic way of describing. So this relates the experimental design and game theoretic languages and terminologies. So then after you've done our small number of experiments, you have to assume sparsity to fit just a first order model. And so the scores, if you fit the models, you get these. And here's your regression against those variables. And then you use the regressions to predict the matrices from the A point of view, from the B point of view. And so once you now have these matrices, now there could be bias. These are just estimated mean rewards. They may not be the true mean rewards that Nash was assuming. And then but if you take them seriously, you can then use the game theory explorer and the methods to enumerate to solve this NP-hard problem with some guarantees. And in this case, there's only one equilibrium. And basically, this equilibrium means that it's best if the first players focus on exploits, wait until after 12, and do this and do research, a small number of research. And player B focus on policies against social engineering, request staff after turn 4, and so if they follow this strategy, this is likely the best strategy for both players, and it's almost sure that blue will win. So there's really nothing that the red team can do in this situation by turn 20, and the blue team has a huge advantage if they follow. So both players do the best they can following this Nash equilibrium, which is the best thing they can do. Then the red team will almost certainly win. I mean, the blue team will almost certainly win. So basically, we demonstrated the value of experimental design equilibrium optimization to develop a helpful policy to help play ThreatGEN. Our ongoing extensions include exploring regression modeling based on sparsity and effect heredity. We didn't do that, so we didn't have any of the interactions in the example I showed. Extending experimental planning methods to address uncertainty, model uncertainty. So the model the DOE that we used was only a regular fractional factorial, which is A and D optimal under just the assumption of first order model only, so we can come up with more robust DOEs, and expanding sufficiency conditions to address model uncertainty. So thank you for listening to this talk, and I will be monitoring the question options to see if there are any interesting questions. Thank you.